Okay, folks, let's get the show on the road. So, in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, PL 1975, Chapter 231, adequate notice of this regular meeting of the Planning Board of the Township of Franklin has been provided. And if everyone could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible. We're all here.
Bill MacGyver.
Here.
Theodore Chase. Robert Thomas. Here. Charles Brown.
Here.
Carl Hauk.
Here.
Mustafa Mansoureh.
Here.
Maher Rafiq. Sorry. Robert Mettler.
Here.
Jennifer Ragnow.
Here.
Gavin Omalola.
And me.
Oh, Chairman Orsini.
Here.
Sorry.
That's okay. It's been that kind of day.
Just trying to add some drama to the meeting.
Blended in the woodwork today.
It was a good idea to leave the chairman hanging.
Yeah. So no minutes, no resolution. So I guess I'll turn it over to you, Mark, just for the discussion of the ordinance.
Sure. So this is the ordinance that you discussed about a month ago. It came from the 2016 Master Plan reexamination. There are a number of changes. I'll just summarize them. The one, if you recall, was the area of the zoning surrounding the Canal Walk development back in the 90s when the township created the Senior Citizen Village District. The majority of that, I'll call it the super block formed by Mettler's, Weston Canal, and Schoolhouse, was included in the Canal Walk development. But there are about 10 or so properties that were not included, and the Senior Citizen Village zone doesn't really apply to just regular single-family homes. So we had to come up with zoning requirements that make sense for those properties. So what the planning board had recommended was that the larger properties be put in the A zone, which is a low-density residential zone. And those were that's the zoning of the properties before they were rezoned to the Senior Citizen Village District. So we're returning those properties back to the zone from which they came. And then the smaller properties, most of them are in the neighborhood of about 1 acre. The recommendation from the planning board was to have language in the ordinance that says that the bulk requirements of the R40 zone, which is basically the 1 acre zone, setbacks, et cetera, would apply to those properties. So that, again, if somebody, as discussed previously, if somebody wanted to put up an addition to their house or a pool or something like that, we have logical standards. The other change is the county open space property at the southeast corner of Weston and Mettler's. That's currently zoned ROL. The recommendation is to put that also to the A zone. It's a recommendation in the reexamination that open space properties be put in an appropriate low-density zone, and A is the adjoining zoning. So we're basically moving that boundary over to incorporate, again, that open space parcel. And then the last change is changing properties that are at the end of Gates and Ellison roads. If you recall, the vast majority of that neighborhood is in the R40 zone, with the exception of just a few properties at the very end of those roads, which for some reason are in the R20 zone. So the recommendation was to move the zoning boundary down to incorporate those properties that are at the end of those, at end of Gates and Ellison, to also put them in the R40 zone, consistent with the majority of, or consistent with the entirety of the rest of the neighborhood. So those are the changes. And I think the one thing I just want to say, because we have the notice that went out, it indicated that if people have any questions that they should call me. So I guess since I'm on camera, I'll suggest that, again, if anybody listening has any questions, feel free to call me. I'll be happy to take the time to answer those questions so that they can be informed before the hearing, before the council. I think a lot of the people that have been calling are those within 200 feet. A lot of people who live within Canal Walk, I'll say it does not affect anybody within Canal Walk. They were noticed because they're within 200 feet of those properties. But again, feel free to call me.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Any,
Do you need a motion on this?
Yeah, so, well, lastly, so the reason it's before you is by municipal land use law, when an ordinance, a zoning ordinance gets introduced, has to be sent to you for any recommendations that you have and for consistency with the master plan. So I'll tell you that I think, obviously, it is consistent with the master plan because it's coming straight from the reexamination of the master plan. So it's directly implementing a recommendation of the master plan. So basically, somebody could make a motion,
I'll make a motion to approve this and send it to council.
yes, and you could do a roll call vote.
I second
I
that.
mean, I'm sorry, a voice vote.
okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No. Okay, the motion carries. All right, so that was easy. Now we need to open it up to general public comments, so I'll entertain a motion to do that.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the meeting is now open to any general planning comments that the public would have that are not subject to their own separate hearing, being, if you're here for CRP CHI Veronica, that will have its own public hearing opening.
Seeing no one coming forward, I would move that this public hearing be closed.
Second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. And the public session is closed, and so now we'll go on to our one hearing that was carried from March 20th on CRP CHI Veronica Avenue.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Peter Lanfrit appearing on behalf of the applicant. We are here tonight to seek site plan approval to construct a warehouse in an M2 zone on property known as Block 88.01, Lot 5.01, with access to the site from Veronica Avenue. As the board may recall, we were here a couple of months ago for a minor subdivision wherein we subdivided a portion of what is commonly known as the Tara Greens Golf Course property and actually consolidated some additional lots to the rear of the property. As a result of that approval by the board, the 99-acre site was created, which is the subject of this application. At the present time, this application involves the elimination of the golf course that is currently on the property. The front piece was retained by the Clearys and will, as of today, continue to operate. On the front piece is the driving range. There's a miniature golf course and a pitch and putt golf course. Those are not owned by the applicant and not part of this application. So this application consists of the development of the actual golf course itself. I intend to call 3 witnesses tonight. I will have the site engineer testify, the architect, and our traffic consultant. And I can gladly say at the beginning of this application that this is an application that is fully conforming in all respects. We are not seeking any variances whatsoever. We've also met with staff since we submitted the original application. They had requested some changes and improvements to the project, and we will discuss those with you and have exhibits to show how certain recommendations have been already incorporated by my client in the construction of this project. Having said all of that, I will call as my first witness Mr. Curley.
Raise your right hand. Solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, I do.
Name and address for the record, please.
It just die? That's right, that's right. We have batteries.
Yeah.
Solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, I do.
Name and address, please.
Robert Curley, 331 Newman Springs Road, Red Bank, New Jersey.
Spell your last name, please.
Curley.
Thank you.
Curley, what is your occupation?
I'm a licensed professional engineer and professional planner in the state of New Jersey.
Can you give the board the benefit of your education?
Yes, I've never appeared before this board, but I've appeared before many other boards in the state of New Jersey. I've been licensed in the state of New Jersey for 29 years.
You're accepted.
Is he testifying in both disciplines or just one?
At this juncture, it'll only be as an engineer.
Okay.
If something changes, I may amend that statement.
Okay.
Mr. Curley, your firm was, you got it working? Mr. Curley, you were the principal engineer in preparing the site plan, which is the subject of this application,
That's correct.
and you will be relying on certain exhibits in your testimony this evening, is that correct?
That's correct.
And are there exhibits in addition to the plan set that was originally submitted to the board?
Yes, there are. There's an exhibit that we've worked with with the engineering staff regarding the main entrance way.
Okay. Perhaps I'd like to mark all the exhibits up front, and I think it'd make it go quicker. Is it on the board or just on?
We have them both.
Okay.
We have
Why
them-
don't we pull the board and at least have the board marked as A1?
This is a plan entitled Entrance Drive Concept Plan A, and it is dated 2/27/19, marked as Exhibit A1.
Prepared by you or under your supervision?
That's correct.
Thank you.
And are there any other exhibits?
Yes, I have a overall aerial exhibit.
Okay, we'll mark that as A2.
And again, this is entitled Aerial Exhibit. It's dated 3/29/2019.
Prepared under the direction of your office?
That's correct.
Thank you.
And this, we're marking the next exhibit, which is entitled 2020 Industrial Landscaping, or Landscape Exhibit, dated March 20th, 2019.
Once again, prepared under your
Prepared under my-
supervision?
That's correct. And then we have two more exhibits. Those are cross-sectional exhibits, and they're entitled 2020 Industrial Cross-Section Exhibit, dated March 20th, 2019. And the reason why there's two of them is we wanted to show the relationship to the property line and a cross-section through the property depicting the proposed warehouse and the existing right-of-way behind our property.
Same date?
That's correct, both March 20th, 2019.
And I've marked those as A4 and A5, Mr. Clarkin.
Thank you, and prepared under your supervision?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Curley. Mr. Curley, first of all, can you describe to the board the existing conditions at the subject property?
Apologize, I don't have my laser pointer, but I'll be talking to Exhibit A2 at this point. This is the overall aerial exhibit that depicts the property, existing property, and a lightly overlaid depiction of our proposed improvements. This exhibit has Veronica Avenue across the bottom of the exhibit, has the railroad right-of-way running diagonally through the exhibit. And Route 27 is on the right-hand side of the exhibit, running vertically. As was pointed out, this property was previously subdivided from the overall golf course proper, and the yellow line now depicts our boundary of the property. Our frontage is on Veronica Avenue, and that'll be our main access way. The plan as depicted indicates the alignment of the driveway that was submitted, that we're proposing with a new alignment. Our original driveway was shifted over a little bit, so, and I'll talk to that in just a minute. But generally, as you can see through the exhibit, the limits of the proposed construction essentially take it through the fairways that were previously used as the golf course, and the remaining portions of the woods are largely undeveloped. We do have a detention facility that is being proposed towards the west end of the property, but essentially that's the limit of the proposed construction. Again, coming in off of Veronica Avenue, and then the circulation aisles go around the building, and those are the existing conditions.
Mr. Curley, can you indicate what the surrounding land uses are?
Yes. So, if I may. I'm going to talk to the cover sheet that was submitted with the original submission. This doesn't have, this is a question, does this need to be marked also? So on the cover sheet of the submission, you can see that the general business development line runs along our property line to the east, and to the including our property, and to the south is industrial M2, and those are our adjacent neighbors. And then to the north, there's a railroad right-of-way, and then a residential zone R10, which is beyond the railroad right-of-way.
And by and large, most of those lots are developed as zoned, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Are there any environmental constraints on our property that you had to consider in developing the site plan that we are asking the board to approve this evening?
Yes. There were a number of constraints in regard to wetlands and buffers that we were impacting, largely with the access way into the property. And we have obtained a DEP permit to facilitate the grading and transition areas, and general permits 10 and 11 for the proposed development.
Thank you. And those have been submitted to the township?
I believe that part of the approval process is that the DEP supplies a copy to the clerk. However, I have a copy with me this evening. If need be, I can supply that as part of the evidence. But we just recently obtained the approval last week, so.
Right. And I believe you sent me a copy, and I did forward it to the township, so the township does have it. Can you now go into what we are proposing in the subject property?
Yes. And I'll speak to the landscape exhibit, which really, although it's from an engineering standpoint, that it graphically depicts all the proposed improvements, doesn't have all of the grading information on it and that, but.
Which exhibit number is that, please?
I'm sorry, excuse me, this is Exhibit A3, and it's entitled 2020 Industrial Landscape Exhibit. Again, as discussed, the Veronica Avenue is located towards the bottom of the exhibit, and our proposed development is centrally located. With this exhibit, the railroad right-of-way, it runs parallel to the top of the exhibit. Our proposal is to provide a full movement access driveway off of Veronica Avenue, enter into the site, and provide vehicular parking on either end of the proposed warehouse building, and also provide truck parking adjacent to, or truck docking, excuse me, adjacent to the building on both sides of the proposed structure. And then on the opposite side of a main access driveway, we would have also trailer storage along both ends of the property. In addition to that, we have a couple of land bank parking areas, and those parking areas are located, this would be for vehicular parking, located at the northern portion of the west side of the building. And then we also have a land banked area for trailer storage, which would be located at the eastern end of the overall structure. In addition to the improvements that I've just mentioned, we have, there's 3 stormwater management facilities that we're proposing for the project. One is located, again, towards the east end of the property. The second is located centrally in the property, which is on the south end of the property line, adjacent to the industrial uses. This detention facility is connected to the westerly detention facility, so they function as one detention basin. And then we have a third below-grade detention facility to accommodate the drainage for our access into Veronica Avenue. That's basically the improvements that we're proposing for the project.
Okay, and in conjunction with those improvements, and as part of our submission, you did submit a report dealing with the stormwater management, also a maintenance manual, and all other relevant documents concerning the stormwater management on that property. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Can you indicate to the board what lighting and landscaping we are proposing?
Yes. So as, excuse me, through the review process, we've had discussions with the planning staff and reviewed our original proposal, and the landscape exhibit that is here today has some improvements based upon your board's professionals' recommendations. So in doing so, what we did a couple of things. We added approximately 40 trees along the railroad right-of-way. In addition to that, we added 1,300 lineal feet of board-on-board fence, 6-foot-high board-on-board fence, and enhanced the again, the landscaping that we had originally proposed, shifting some of the landscaping closer to the property line to lessen the impact on the adjacent railroad right-of-way.
And
One other item that I didn't touch on with the original discussion is we're providing a sound wall which is located along the southerly border along here, and there was comments in the review letter as far as how high the sound wall was, and it's going to be, we're proposing it as a 16-foot high sound wall.
now, is there also lighting being proposed on the property?
That's correct. So there would be lighting along the entrance road on the east side of the entrance road coming in, lighting in the center island that will illuminate the drive court, and then there'll be wall pack lighting or building mounted lighting, excuse me, that'll illuminate the parking areas for the trailer docking area.
Okay, and for the record, there are 437 parking spaces proposed, of which we are going to land bank 43, is that correct?
That's correct.
And the ordinance requires 74 parking spaces.
That's correct.
Okay. How is refuse being handled?
So right now, the end user for the project or for the building has not been decided. Typically, what we would do on a warehouse situation like this is provide trash compactors that would be attached to one of the docking bays. And depending upon the user, possible multiple trash compactors would be added through along the area of the docking bays and attached immediately adjacent to the building. So it would occupy one of the docking bays.
So at this point, we're not proposing any dumpsters of any kind. Everything will be handled at this juncture by compactors.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, you talked about the supplemental landscaping that you were adding adjacent to the residential properties. Is there any landscaping that is being provided on the Veronica Avenue side of the property?
Only adjacent to the detention facility, which we have depicted on the south side of the proposed detention basin, and some additional landscaping that would be provided along the east side. The reason why we wouldn't be providing additional landscaping in this area would be we have the sound wall that would be preventing any landscaping from providing any useful purpose.
Okay. Now, you also indicated in your opening comments that we did have a driveway proposed in the original application, which has now been revised, and you have an exhibit depicting that. Can you just bring that exhibit up and indicate to the board how the driveway is changing?
That's correct. And this is Exhibit A1, and it's entitled Entrance Drive Concept Plan A. Although it's lightly colored in red, our proposed, or as reviewing the driveway entrance with the board's professionals, we've modified the driveway from just coming straight along adjacent to the property line and putting a slight curve on it so that the driveway is more perpendicular to Veronica Avenue. The concern that was voiced by the board's professionals was that the entranceway for a vehicle leaving the site would be coming in at a slight skew to Veronica Avenue. So we've modified that in accordance with, or we will modify that in accordance with the board's professionals' recommendations.
Okay. And that is the sole method of ingress and egress for all of the trucks and also the employees, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And there are some wetlands along that driveway, are they not? And those have been permitted?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Now, there were staff reports that were generated in conjunction with this application. I'm going to go just get them on the record, but for the record, you've reviewed all of the staff reports, and we can comply with any and all of the requests of the township professionals. Is that correct?
I would like to mention, yes, the short answer is yes, but I would like to mention one thing. We are requesting a waiver. One of the ordinance sections and it would be a design waiver, and it's ordinance section 112-88, and that's for driveway aisle width, whereby 26 feet is required and 24 feet is being provided. In that vein, the areas where we are proposing a 24-foot wide aisle would be only in the vehicular parking areas, not in any of the truck areas. The main access road coming in is 36 feet wide. The circulation aisle that surrounds the building is all 30 feet wide. The drive court aisle is 70 feet wide. So all other areas are in compliance with the ordinance, but I just wanted to bring that to the board's attention.
And that's where the employees would park?
That's correct.
Okay, and was there a reason why you wanted to make that a little bit less than the ordinance required?
To try and cut down as much as we could on impervious surfaces, that was really the driving force. It's a standard in the residential site improvement standards for parking facilities, and in fact, the ordinance provides for the ability to have lesser drive aisle width.
Okay, thank you. All right, now for the staff reports. The reports that you reviewed was the report of Mr. Healy dated February 19th, 2019, the report of Mr. House dated February 26, 2019, the report of Mr. Russo, the consulting engineer, dated February 21st, 2019, the Health Department dated February 7th, 2019, and the Police Department had no comment. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So those are all the staff reports.
That's correct.
Okay. Also, has this application been submitted to Somerset County?
It has, and we've received a letter of no interest from Somerset County.
And have you submitted an application to the Delaware and Raritan Canal Commission?
We have. We've got an initial review, and we were going to try to resubmit to them, but we wanted to understand our position this evening. If the board possibly would have made some modifications to our original submission, we wanted to make sure that we incorporated everything into a resubmission to the Delaware Raritan.
So you received their initial review, they had some comments, and all of their comments can and will be addressed.
That's correct.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Quick question. Do you have any, is this going to be, I know you don't have a tenant, so some of this is unknown, but is this proposed to be a 24-hour operation,
It is.
7 days a week?
It is.
The other question I have is about the sound wall. What are we protecting from sound on that, in that particular location? Is that necessary as opposed to landscaping? I mean, it looks to me like it's a wall between some businesses and Route 27. I'm not sure it's practical or desired or whatever, but I think if sound were an issue, I'd probably want it where the residential section is.
Largely a contractual obligation between the previous owner and the current owner of the property.
There is still a residence there, Mr. Thomas. One of the Clearys still resides at that property, and I believe there is also another house closer to Route 27. So when we negotiated the purchase of the property, one of the requirements in the contract was to put a sound wall up.
Okay, are we, as the driving public, then going to see a 16-foot sound wall from Route 27 and Veronica Avenue, or is it going to be, what's it going to be made of? What's it going to look like? And how long is it? I forgot what you mentioned.
It's approximately 800 feet in length. As far as being able to visualize this from Route 27, this is set back from Route 27.
I understand it's set back, but it's also set back on a golf course and relatively low buildings. I just don't particularly want to get the feeling that I'm looking at a prison. 800 feet, significant.
Again, from a statutory standpoint, with residents immediately abutting this, and the location of those residents in proximity to the property line, that is the reason why the sound wall is. In comparison, the closest residents to the property line along on the opposite side of the railroad right-of-way is 400 feet from the existing or our proposed building.
Okay, but again, you said it's set back off 27. Approximately how far, and is visible, are there, what does it look like, and are there things, if it's,
The material that's being proposed is a vinyl type material that is placed between foundations. It can be made any color. There's a multitude of colors. The color that we were actually planning for was the color of the brick that's behind you, in that color palette.
and they're going to be similar to the ones along highways, is that what we're?
It's not going to be a masonry wall, no. It's going to be, it'll look like wood panels that are slipped between channeled steel.
Would have been nice to have, I don't have any,
Well, how far back from 27? You didn't say.
It's almost 1,400 feet.
from 27?
That's correct.
And since Bob brought up the question about sound, these trash compactors, are they going to be able to be heard from the residences on the other side of the property?
I'll be honest, I don't have the decibel levels that the compactors work at. I'm sure we could stipulate that the compactors be only used during the daytime hours.
Yes.
The other thing, just for the record, statutorily, under New Jersey statutes, these types of facilities can only allow noise at the property levels of 65 decibels during the daytime, where the property, where this facility would abut either a residential zone or a residential property. And in the evenings, that number changes to 50 decibels. And if, in fact, we exceed that, we would be subject to summonses or violations either by the local municipality or by the state. So with the two residences that are on the Cleary property, we do have to meet those requirements, those statutory requirements.
Well, that decibel level is fine, but I think a restriction of 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. would also.
And we don't have a problem with that. But again, if for some reason anything happens on that site that creates noise over those decibel levels, then we're in violation of both local ordinances and state statute.
If I could just make a general recommendation, and it doesn't just apply to this development, but any, I would recommend that if there's a concern like that, you address it through the site design as opposed to operational restrictions, because it's impossible for us to know that address can operate from 7 to 11 and that one's 9 to 5. There's no way to track that. So, if there's a concern about something like that, you should be addressing it through screening, fencing, things that they actually physically have to do on the site.
Okay, well, talking about screening and fencing, how tall are the shrubs going to be again on that residential border?
The installed height is 5 to 6 feet. I do have another exhibit that I can show to show the cross section of the proposed landscaping that we have in various areas along the property line.
Yes.
Yeah, but, okay, so before you do that, though, and my question goes to what Cecile is talking about and maybe to what some of Bob is talking about. So the wall, which you're contractually, but not statutorily, obligated to.
It's both.
No, it's only contractual. You made a contract with the Clearys that they don't sell you the property unless you build a wall. We don't have any requirement for a wall. That's a contractual obligation. No. No, you have to be sworn in. No, you can't speak out of turn, sorry. No. Not until you're sworn in, and not until I say you're so. All right, so let's go back to that. So that's that. and should be landscaped. We'll get into more of that. And I think all those neighbors on the top, the residential, what the hell are they getting? They're getting 5 to 6 feet shrubs? No, they're going to get something more than that.
And there's also a fence along that entire property.
Not enough. Why the hell would you screen 2 houses with a wall, and you're going to take all those residential properties and give them a 6-foot fence and 5 to 6 foot shrubs? That's garbage. No.
I second that.
Right, the 16
Okay.
feet
Not
for
going to
the
happen.
2 Cleary properties, but 6 feet for the residences?
Can I ask you a question?
If I make,
lem-
if I can show the cross-section through the property, just to let you understand the impact of what we're doing and the existing grades that are associated with it.
Okay.
And maybe that'll let the board
Okay,
feel a
why
little bit
don't you
better.
go ahead and do that, because I sense that I've opened something up here.
Can I just say, it's just a very brief question. Was that consideration, because the sensitivity of that's, and exactly to that point, there are more residents back there than the 2 here. Did that thought ever occur to you when you were proposing this to build a wall on that side, the soundproof?
There is existing vegetation that exists on either side of the railroad right-of-way. We're supplementing that, and we're meeting the ordinance requirements for providing a buffer, continuous buffer along a property line. The requirements for a buffer adjacent to a residential use, it requires that 1 tree be installed for every 10 feet. There's a total of 1,930 feet along that property line. We're providing 197 trees along that property line. So we're exceeding the ordinance requirement for residential buffer along that property line. In addition to that, we've enhanced it with a 6-foot-high board-on-board fence, 1,300 feet along that property line. And again, if I may, utilize these exhibits.
Yeah, please go ahead. Let's see that.
And this concern was brought up by your professionals in regard to being able to better buffer the adjacent use. And again, our use is adjacent to the railroad right-of-way. I understand the residents are still back there, but they're 400 feet away from the proposed building. So I'm looking at exhibits A4 and A5. These exhibits show the existing grade. Now, and if I can, I will work from the north end or northern end of the property or west end of the property and go towards Route 27. So what we did was I tried to choose some representative cross sections, and in particular, I lined up the most westerly cross section with the drive aisle of the entrance into the rear truck court. The second cross section on Exhibit A4 is approximately midway in the building. So what the exhibit shows is our property and the existing grade is essentially flat, and there's not a whole lot of change from what we're proposing as an elevation to the existing grade and all the way out to the proposed building or existing buildings that are along this area. And again, with the 6-foot fence and the plantings that we were proposing, we felt that this was a more than meets the ordinance requirements, in addition to providing the 6-foot fence. In the middle of the building, the elevation difference is substantially different. So our drive court or truck court area is probably 6 feet below the existing grade of the railroad right-of-way. Again, we felt in this area it wasn't providing any use to provide a 6-foot fence. So we provided a board-on-board fence in the area where we were at least level or above the adjacent use from about 1/3 of the building to, again, towards the end of the building. The existing ground provides a berm that, again, is lower, our property is lower than the adjacent uses. So providing the landscaping continuously throughout provides a buffer for that. And again, now I'm referring to A5. We have cross-section C and cross-section D. Cross-section D, again, was aligned with the drive aisle. And again, I wanted to try and get a representative understanding of the elevations, across this area. And we've included a board-on-board fence for that length. And again, this area for cross-section C is slightly above the elevation. It's about 2 to 4 feet above the elevation of the existing railroad right-of-way. And again, we're providing landscaping and the fence. And then on the cross-section D, the existing grade is basically flat, maybe just slightly above, 1.5 feet or so above. And again, we're providing the fencing and the landscaping in that area.
Okay, you said that area too was also going to be used as a trailer storage area.
It's a land-banked trailer storage area. That's
A
correct.
what?
Land-banked.
Okay, but
It's not being,
you're also then buffering from the residents view of all the trailers lined up as a board, correct?
that's correct.
Right? I think this system you've devised is also going to be effective in keeping truck headlights out of the backs of the houses when they have to drive, especially the ones that park at the landing docks are facing neighborhood. Now, you say it's 400 feet. Is it 400 feet from the house to the property line, or 400 feet from building to building?
From the building to the closest residential use. That's correct.
Okay,
There are some garages that are closer, but there's no residential use that's closer than 400 feet.
But they're closer to the trucks that are at the loading docks than 400
So from the
feet.
front of the truck, it would be 60 feet, so it would be 340 feet to the front of a vehicle that was parked facing the residence.
And the driveway
And the potential for stored trailers that would be backed into this area that would also block those lights.
well, they do block that, but I'm wondering if they create another visual issue. I'm not sure. I don't know the trucking business. I have no issue with this application or anything like that, but I'm just wondering why with 1 million square feet, we also need all this trailer storage. I would think product is moving in and moving out, not, I don't know. Just starting to have a few reservations about a few of the things here. I don't generally like storing trailers. It's your property, it's your use, so if it's properly buffered. But I come back to what was mentioned before, where you get a 16-foot solid wall in front of virtually nothing, and 6 feet of landscaping, 6 feet high landscaping and a fence, and separating the residences. I really don't think that's fair.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And, if you think about Commerce Drive and Frito-Lay and some of those buildings back there, there is a sound barrier, a landscape sound barrier between the residential street that abuts that and the use. And some of it's, not much of it's at grade, but it suffices to prevent the kind of things that Bob is talking about in terms of lights, noise from tractor trailers. And you say that's banked, which means that it may not be built depending on your use, but it could be built. And once we give you an approval, then that's no obligation of you to come back because it's part of the approval that is banked. We understand you could use it. So even though you can say, Well, that's not going to be the current situation envisioned. We don't know what the use is. And, if it does turn out to be a significant intensive use of tractor trailers and such, I think those residences just need to be protected. I mean, you've got two residences that are getting a 16-foot high wall, and you've got, can't count them, but I know there's more than two who are getting substantially less.
If I may address that, Mr. Orsini, please. The property or the project that you referred to by Frito-Lay, there is a sound wall there, but those houses are substantially closer to the property line of Frito-Lay. They are almost in Frito-Lay's backyard. There is not 400 feet from the Frito-Lay property to those houses. That's number one. Number two, the Township has a landscape and buffer requirement, which we have met. We also, as I indicated, have an obligation to mitigate noise. If for some reason this facility does generate noise and we have a problem, we will be back, because we will have to come back to amend our site plan to put up a sound wall along that property line if a problem exists. I think the other thing you got to consider is, I don't know if it is always necessarily the best thing to have somebody in their backyard sitting there looking at a 16-foot wall if it's not necessary. I think if I was sitting in that backyard, I'd rather look at landscaping and a fence rather than a 16-foot wall.
But you can landscape the wall.
Excuse me?
And in fact, you should landscape the wall you're talking about too, but we're going to go there in a little bit.
Okay, but the reality is we've met your ordinance requirement. There is no ordinance requirement that there be a sound wall along a residential zone line. We've met your landscaping and buffering requirement. So I think what we have done is complied with what the Township asks us to do. If a problem does exist in the future, again, we do have a legal responsibility to mitigate that noise, and if at that time we have to mitigate it, it may be by way of either additional landscaping, additional fencing, or a sound wall.
How tall are the trailers going to be that are going to be stored there? What, 12 feet, 14 feet?
14 feet. 14 feet.
Now, when you say
14
they're
feet.
going to
So
be
you're
stored, are they
expecting
banked?
a 6-foot wall to screen a 14-foot trailer? Those people, those residences are all going to be looking at 14-foot trailers
Madam Vice
coming
Chair.
over that 6-foot wall.
Madam Vice Chair, if I may, and again, largely the area, the middle third of the building is, the parking lot is depressed down and approximately 8 feet. So if the truck is 4 feet tall or 14 feet tall, it's depressed down 8 feet. You're only going to see 6 feet of the top of the truck. That's in the center. Now,
They shouldn't see any of the trucks.
but
there
we're
should
having
be enough
but
screening.
We're proposing a 6-foot board-on-board fence, which would block any stored vehicles that were along the
You said the parking
northern
lot's
edge.
8 foot depressed,
in the center portion of the building.
and
That's
the
correct.
truck is 14 feet high, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so
A 6-foot
that's
fence.
6 feet.
A 6-foot fence would block a stored tractor trailer across the center of the structure.
So that leaves
I'm
the
not
other
saying- I'm not-
two-thirds of the building, though, that's not 8 feet depressed.
That's correct. Mr. Chair.
Will the fence be intact, or will there be gaps through it?
I'm sorry, Madam.
Will the shrubbery be intact? Will it be staggered so that it provides a continuous screening, or will there be gaps through it?
At maturity, it would. I'm not going to say it would be that way when it's installed, but definitely at maturity, it will.
And the
provide
fence is a
continuous-
solid board-on-board fence. It does not have slats or gaps.
The point is also the fence is only covering a third of the property. There's still 2/3 that you will not be covering, the height distance, the difference. And also, there's no cross-section on this side of the property owner where you have the contract with. How close is that home to this property?
Just about 400 feet.
Just about meaning less than.
That's correct.
Okay.
About 390 feet.
And the properties to the north were what? 400 feet?
400 feet to the building, to the proposed
All right, so
building.
same distance away approximately. One is
That's
getting a
property-
16-foot wall and the other is not.
Property line,
Right.
that's correct.
Right, so same distance. One is getting 16-foot wall, the other one is not getting that, right?
That's correct.
And the one that's getting a wall is actually a much less intensive part of the site use than what you're
Exactly.
proposing for the back. Story doesn't add up.
Well, Mr. Chairman, if I may, in discussing it with my client, first of all, we don't believe that the sound wall is necessary. There's a reason why there is a sound wall between our site and the Cleary site, and pursuant to the application that's being submitted, it's consistent with your ordinance. But however, my client has indicated if the board wants, we can build a fence 10 feet high during the entire length of that property along the railroad right-of-way, if that would help. And again, that doesn't obviate our need to do something further if there are noise problems in the future. I mean, that's an ongoing obligation that my client has or the owner of that property has. That's by statute. But we would put, in addition to the landscaping that we are proposing, put a 10-foot high fence along the entire length of that property.
There is no requirement to put a 16-foot wall around the property at all. Why then should we, as a planning board, allow it on that side near the other property? Why should we care about the contract that you have with the client?
It's our property. There's nothing that says we cannot put a wall on that property.
Yeah.
Right.
The question becomes the fact that you don't know who is going to be the end user of that property at the end of the day. I think your mitigation plan should be consistent enough to fulfill what we want.
But wait a second. Is there a right of an owner to put a 16-foot
Right.
wall up
Exactly.
without a
There's-
permit or a
Well,
hearing?
well, it's two different questions. They would definitely need to get construction permits, but there's no ordinance restriction that would prohibit it.
Well, I'm happy to know that. Then that means they can put a 16-foot wall in that
Exactly.
side, too.
Exactly.
Mr. Chairman.
Bob?
Okay. Just a couple of thoughts. The conversation began with an objection to the 16-foot wall. And as to how that would appear. Now, when you go along 27, you hardly even know that the W.A. Cleary Corporation is there. You just don't see it. You'd have to be going kind of slowly and probably driving dangerously if you were to even spot the corporation buildings, which are closer to 27 than the wall would be. But if you were walking along 27 and you really wanted to look back there, or if you were on the golf course, what's left of it, and wanted to look back there, the wall would not just be this great expanse of wall, but the view would be broken by the existing buildings, the existing vegetation, and the house. Mm-hmm. So that would mitigate the appearance of it as anything like a prison. But if you don't like the wall that might look like a prison, why would you want it along the line between this building and the houses?
Yeah, no, actually, that's a good point.
And if I can add to that, what you have also between the houses and the building is the old Millstone and New Brunswick Railway, otherwise known as sometimes the Millstone Division of the Pennsylvania Railroad. So I'm talking about companies long out of business. But because they've been long out of business, no one bothered to attend to the banks of, I think it's a 60-foot right-of-way that they had, 60 or 66, I'm not sure. So trees have grown up along there and brush has grown up along there on either side of the railroad. So between, so you have stuff that is much higher than the 5 or 6 feet that's being talked about that already exists between those houses and this building. And these are just thoughts, but I wanted to bring
No,
them up.
and I don't disagree with you. And actually, I didn't have a problem with the existing proposed 800-foot wall being seen so much as Bob did. But if you're gonna, you know, and you're right about all of the brush and stuff, but that may visually block certain things, but it certainly doesn't block some of the noise, and it won't block the lights completely, and it won't. I mean, a lot of it depends on what is actually constructed. I mean, right now, that says bank, so we don't know that there's going to be trailer parking back there, but there could be, and I think the board has to act on what the applicant is telling them the site could be at its maximal developable vision and not something less. So when somebody tells me they're banking spaces, I like that because there's less impervious coverage, but I'm under no illusion that they might not be built. So I'm dealing with that.
And I wouldn't want to see a wall 1,300 feet long like by the neighbors. The only thing is that what you do on that side of the project, you can also landscape the side facing neighbors so that you break up the continuity of the wall a little bit. I just have, you know, you have, I think we have an obligation to make sure we air out our concerns and make sure they're all taken care of. As a planning board, we basically tried for 20 years to kill that neighborhood. We rezoned it to some sort of commercial, some sort of other zoning other than residential. People kept coming and building houses anyway. We got rid of Colgate paper, which you are aware of too. Now you have people who built some pretty big, nice houses there who, when they did this, bordered a golf course. Now we're putting a 24/7 warehouse facility, and it isn't so much the use as, you know, it's big. The size of it makes it a little bit more difficult. You know, I just want to say, I particularly like the idea that this doesn't interfere traffic-wise with the bus company. I think you have some good things here. Maybe there's a common ground, but I think that neighborhood deserves a little bit more protection.
Mr. Thomas, first of all, the Colgate site, it does not abut this property. It's on the other side of
I know, but
Churchill.
it's the same neighborhood.
It is the same neighborhood.
Avenue.
Yes. Second of all, again, although these people bought houses or developed houses abutting what was a golf course, they also bought houses abutting a property which was zoned industrial all that time. So there was always the potential that there was going to be industrial development on that property. It isn't that we got a variance or zone change to create an industrial zone. That property has been zoned industrial forever. So there was always...
I'm not fighting you on that. I understand that, and I'm sure most of them understand it too.
Okay.
I don't know any of them who could have conceived a 1 million square foot single building with all the trucking. All I'm asking as a board member is that we find a way to make it a little more palatable.
Yeah, and I do think if we raise the height of, we do a fence along the entire length of that side at 10 feet high, I think that accomplishes what you want, along with the landscaping that we are proposing. And again, that doesn't relieve us of the additional obligation of noise mitigation should that exist in the future.
That's true, and if it's wood, it looks a little bit more fitting in with what's around it. I have no issue with that part of it.
All right, well, so it seems as though we come to some common ground that at least maybe we could do the 10-foot fence and the landscaping and things of that nature. Yeah, Ted?
In the stretch where your property is below the top of the railroad embankment, where does your property line lie with respect to the slope there? I mean, are you going to, when you build a 10-foot fence, if you're starting out 6 foot below the railroad embankment, then it's only going to be 4 foot above the embankment.
Yeah,
It's only on 1/3 of
yeah,
the
Dr.
property, though. Let's keep that in mind.
Well, I think,
Yeah.
they're,
Right,
I
he's
think
talking
they
about the
just
percent.
indicated they're going to provide it along the entire length of the back of the building, right? In the trailer? Is that what we just heard?
That's correct.
But that was their initial submittal, but now they've, or indication, but now they've testified that they're going to put it along the entirety of the back of the trailer parking. And I think Dr. Chase brings up a good question, because my recommendation was going to be, don't put it along the railroad right of way, because some portions, that's below the grade of the parking lot. You should be putting that fence along wherever it's highest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You need,
Yeah, it would make sense. You don't need a fence in a
Yes.
valley, right?
How tall are the trucks, roughly?
14 feet.
14 feet.
I think one of the things we do have an ordinance requirement that they do exceed. They've testified that they're going to test, our ordinance speaks to trees. And I think it's one tree, we might want to update it. I think it's one tree for every 10 feet, and I think it says 3 feet in height. And they're providing 6 to 8 feet at planting. I think they indicated double staggered row and a 10-foot high fence. You know, all of those are above and beyond, and it's not the obligation of the board to completely block any potential view of this facility. It's to impose mitigation measures to screen
It's
the
not just the
facility.
view.
But, you know,
it's
this
the,
is an industrial
you know,
zone. Somebody in their second floor window is looking out.
Yeah, I
There's no
mean-
way to screen that.
Yeah, I mean,
There's no way
yeah,
to block
you
that
can't ask them to
entirely.
build it 30 feet high. I understand that. But I mean, it's not just about the visual, right? That's one aspect. It's about, you know, the noise, you know, it's a 24/7 operation. So, I mean, who knows what it's actually going to be used for? But yeah, I mean, you have to consider those things.
I
The
would
other-
just like to say we have to consider how distasteful this looks in terms of how inequitable it seems, that you have the properties the same distance away. One is getting a 16-foot wall, the other one is getting shrubbery with a fence. No matter how colorful we make this, it does not look good from a perception standpoint, especially given the history of the properties to the north and the fact that, you know, I was just in there, it doesn't look good at all to me.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, you know, the negotiation to sell the property, I guess, included this wall and, you know, yeah. So another question I had was along the lines of, in the staff reports, was a fire department request for a second access point that would be a bollard and chain access point for emergency. That you do not show, and that seems to be a key element of the John House's.
Mr. Orsini, we are in negotiations with 3 or 4 different property owners. We will be providing, as Mr. House requested, because we indicated we will comply with all conditions of this staff report, a secondary method of ingress and egress, whether it be back out to Veronica through one of the existing industrial buildings or out to 27 through the Cleary property. We have not yet determined that,
Okay.
but we will provide, because Mr. House required it, a secondary method of emergency ingress and egress. And as we made clear, the vehicular ingress and egress is on Veronica Avenue and Veronica Avenue only.
Interestingly enough, is the requirement for a second emergency access point in an ordinance? Is that by ordinance that has to be done?
No, I
No,
don't believe so. I think it's
No.
sound site design.
Yeah, see, that's interesting to me. And I'm not going to get on a soapbox, but I'll say this. If we're going to listen to John House and say, oh, we can get a second access point, we'll do it because John House said so. And not that I have anything against John House, and I happen to agree with him. But it's not by ordinance. And yet, we as a planning board, we're having a discussion about whether we can get a 10-foot fence for a very good reason, not by ordinance. Hello?
There is a slight difference. I think John House's is a health safety issue as opposed to, unless there's a determination that this facility has an impact on the adjoiners vis-à-vis noise or things of that nature, it does not rise to the same level as John House's request.
I respectfully disagree, Peter, because if I'm living there, I think health and safety, when it comes to noise, pollution, lights, visual, is pretty important.
And we
You could say, if you were going to dig in your heels against John House, right, you could say, hey, look, I've got a circular circulation plan. I don't have a dead end there. You can get to all of the building. I'm not going to do it. Why aren't you doing that?
If you want me to not to agree with Mr. House, I'll be happy to do that.
No, I want you to agree with Mr. House, but I also want you to see the wisdom in agreeing with some of what we're saying too.
And again, I think what we're doing and what we're proposing will address those issues.
Okay. How about the detention basins? They seem to be fairly open. Is there an opportunity for landscaping on those basins, which would also decrease your tree in lieu payment requirement, which is considerable? And we're very grateful for it, but I'm giving you an opportunity to put some more on site.
Just so you know, we've sat down with Mr. Healy, not me personally, but the professionals, to discuss landscaping. We have enhanced the landscaping on the site dramatically. If there's an opportunity to provide additional landscaping, we can sit down with Mr. Healy and look at it, and if we can do it, we'll do it.
I mean, I just look at the top of especially your basin there on the upper right and seeing that large expanse of lawn that could potentially be treed. And, you know, if the design of the basin would allow it, could be a place where you could enhance the landscaping as well.
We don't have a problem with that, Mr. Orsini.
I think those are the biggest points I had. Other than, one last thing. So it's good that the parking in the banking is fine. There's still the number of parking spaces for a warehouse seems considerable. Are you considering, they must not all be employee parking spaces. Are you considering truck parking, loading docks, all of that as parking spaces? With 300 and some, 393 or something like that seems a lot for any warehouse use compared to what other applications that, you know, you yourself have brought before the board.
If you recall, and we went around with this with the Amazon site, that site, which is a smaller warehouse, had 900 and some parking spaces. We have, was the number 400 and some for a warehouse that's a third larger than Amazon.
Yeah.
And again, my client doesn't want to spend money putting parking spaces in that they don't need, but if there's shifts and shift changes, you need to have enough parking to accommodate the employees on site. The employees that are coming in for the next shift have to park. My client, and I can have him come up here, as an experienced builder of these facilities and knows his needs and his demands, and that's why we came up with a number of parking spaces that we came up with. We don't want to put any more parking in than we needed.
No, that's fine. And all of your employee parking is on the one side, the sort of the left side as we're looking at it, or is it left and right, or just point that out?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, it's on both ends of the building.
Okay. I mean, I assume that depending on whom ultimately occupies it, if you don't have to build certain parts of it, you won't, like you said.
If we can bank some more spaces somewhere down the road, we'd be happy to, but I think based on what my client knows and envisions, we probably will need what we are proposing.
Okay.
Chairman, if I may, there's one item that I neglected to inform the board of. During our review and during our analysis of the fire systems for the area, we are proposing a water tank which is located at the west end of the detention facility. In addition to that, it's a 35-foot diameter water tank, 35 feet tall, and a 17 by 25-foot pump house. And I apologize for not bringing that to the board's attention.
And that is solely for fire
That's correct.
use?
It, fire
Pumping.
pumping and also for the water storage.
And that has to be done why? Just because it's, for the size of the building, it's just impossible with a normal fire hydrant and a loop water main to get even, you still need more?
And it's to ensure that there's adequate volume for the sprinkler system that would be.
Okay.
Quick question on that. Those dashed lines, I'm assuming that's the setback line, so it's outside of the required setbacks?
That's correct.
All right, thank you.
Mike, I got a couple comments. I'll do the underground. The township standard is to require all water mains to be within pavement areas. So if you could revise the plans, the back berm and the front area has it in landscaped areas.
If I may, during our review with the fire official, he requested that we modify the location of the fire hydrants that we had proposed. Those are going to be modified. They're going to be in front of all of the doorway entrances. So that's going to change the location of where the water main would be.
So they will be in the pavement areas?
They will be in the pavement areas, that's correct.
Okay. Based on we haven't seen a report regarding the water tank, but this property may qualify for a meter pit. So once the water division gets those numbers, we'll look at that requirement so that your front entrance and tap off of Veronica may change a little.
Understood.
Okay.
Peter, just curiosity, what are your other witnesses? You have an architect?
I have the architect
And what else?
and the traffic.
Okay, because we were having a little sidebar conversation about what the looks like, and I said, I remember from the 20th that, your architect was the one that was here.
And
I felt bad that, they came and we sent them away.
We flew him back.
Yeah,
He likes New Jersey so much.
all right. All right, so good. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't going to start asking questions that were going to be answered anyway. So does the board have any more questions for our engineer? I mean, he will remain sworn in, so if you think of something, you can always ask it. Why don't we move, what do you want to move to next? Okay, let's do that.
I have a question, please. The question is about the parking. Do you have any intention of having parking for handicapped people within the facility, and how many spaces of that do you have?
So we have a total of 12 handicap parking stalls
Right.
that are located on either end of the building. So there's 6 on either end, and out of those 12, there's 8 van stalls. So there'd be 4 van stalls on either end, and then 2 regular handicap stalls. So there'd be 12.
Out of the 437 spaces you have for parking space, right?
The requirement is 2%, so we exceed that.
If it is to be, yeah, that means you are okay. Thank you.
Mr. Valenza?
Raise your right hand. Solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, I do.
Name and address, please.
Hold the microphone up.
Lawrence T. Valenza, V-A-L-E-N-Z-A,
Lawrence, L-A-W?
correct?
Thank you.
Address is 2150 Schutz Road, St. Louis, Missouri.
Welcome.
Mr. Valenza, you're a licensed architect
I am
in how many states?
in 5 states.
As long as one of them is New Jersey, you're accepted.
Yes.
Okay, we're good.
And Mr. Valenza, before you go into this building, can you give the board a little bit of a benefit of your experience in designing these types of buildings and how long you've been in the business of designing warehousing?
Sure. I've been an architect for 30 years. I've been in with my current firm for 16 years, and we specialize in industrial architecture nationwide. We've probably done 30 to 35 million square feet of this type of building in the state of New Jersey, very close to here. And I personally have probably done 10 of those, been the architect in charge for 10 million of those.
Okay,
So about a third of our projects.
so impress us.
I'll give it a shot. So I tell you, maybe if you want to pull that up here, I'll just talk to the board instead of the. So, go back to the floor plan. So in the previous testimony, the configuration of the building and the docks and everything was pretty well explained. The only thing in addition that I would add on the floor plan is that this building is designed to potentially be a two-tenant building. So at the northeast corner and the southwest corner, those are potential office corners. And when we look at the elevations, that'll explain why the exterior design is the way it is. Let's go to the next sheet. So the building is 47 feet tall, so it's within the ordinance of 50 feet. And it is a tilt-up concrete structure, painted, 3 paint colors. It's hard to get different computers to show colors the right way, but we're proposing a neutral color scheme, light gray, medium gray, dark gray. So it's a neutral color palette. No bright colors, nothing, red stripes around the building or anything like that. And what we like to do is we like to use color blocking rather than stripes. The stripes tend to accentuate the length of these buildings. So we like to apply the color in blocks, which gives it a rhythm and kind of breaks up that large facade. So we have a darker colored base on the building, that's the medium color, with the light color being the majority of the wall. And then we do these dark vertical elements with a translucent panel window system that lets diffuse light into the warehouse to help with, on the dock bays, to help light those without using artificial lights, saves on electricity during the daytime hours. So those bands kind of give it a nice rhythm. And then at the corners of the building, those are our office corners. Here's an enlarged view of the office corner. So we have about 4 bays that are detailed, embellished a little more. It's got a standoff panel, and we'll look at the rendering that we can pull up and see it in 3D. But this is a standoff panel that's kind of a freestanding panel out in front with a translucent panel behind it. So we get a nice shadow line, some depth. There's a metal-clad canopy over the entrance, which gives it some shadows and some depth and protection from the weather for people coming and going. And then we take that darker color, we raise it up to give the entrance a little bit different proportions and kind of set it off from the rest of the building. That translucent panel system we're using in generous amounts on those office corners. And the corners are mirror images of each other. The opposite corners of the building look exactly the same. And then we start the transition to the regular detailing on the dock walls. We also have a monument sign that'll show on the site plan the location of it, but it's detailed to pick up the same detailing as that standoff panel. So we've got this standoff panel element with this little corner detail, and we kind of detailed the monument sign to match. Monument sign is 6 feet tall. The ordinance says it can be 10 feet tall. This is not that tall, and it's 100 square feet, which matches the ordinance. The only thing we don't know is what the signage on it will look like, because that'll be driven by the tenant.
Now, where are the mechanicals for this building?
The mechanical equipment will be on the roof, and what we do is we always set them back 1 bay from the edge of the roof. That gives sufficient, the buildings are tall enough that when you drive around these buildings, the parapet wall cuts off your vision so that you can't see that rooftop equipment. Where this building is located, it's so far from the roads, and from Veronica, it's screened by existing buildings and trees. I don't know that you'll even see the building from Veronica Avenue anyway, so. But the mechanical equipment, we set back toward the middle of the roof as much as we can, and as long as it's not right on the edge, you can't see it from sight lines.
Okay. And is there any lighting on the building itself?
The only lighting on the building will be the underside of the canopies to give some light at the entryways, and then the wall pack lighting on the dock walls that Mr. Curley talked about. And those are LED lights that have good cutoff angles. They throw the light down onto the pavement and not scatter it around. So it's well-controlled light.
Okay. And then you do have an exhibit that actually shows the
Yes,
corners of the building?
This gives a better idea in 3D of the three-dimensionality of that office corner. So that's the same thing we just looked at in elevation, but you can actually see that this panel stands off, and the depth of that canopy and the shadow lines and that translucent. It's not glass. It's a translucent material that lets diffuse light get into the building. And then this is clear vision glass down low where the offices will be. So you can see out through those windows. You can see in when the lights are on at night. This you can't see through. It's a translucent material.
And how many loading bays are there in this building?
Trick question. It shows on the plan, if we can go back to the plan. It might just be on the site plan. Yeah, they're not numbered on there. 159.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Questions from the board?
Yes, are all the lighting on site going to be LED?
I believe so, yes.
Yes.
All the plan sheets that you've shown us, they're the same as what was submitted with the application?
The floor plan and the elevations are what was submitted with the application. The 3D rendering is something that you haven't seen, so that probably needs to be made an exhibit.
Okay. Do we have a hard copy
Yes,
of
we
the
do.
board?
Yep.
Okay.
And we'll mark
Up
that
to
A6.
A6?
All the lighting is LED. We don't get anything but LED anymore.
Any other questions of the board for the architect?
One question, and maybe this is more for the engineer, but in the engineering report, it talked about the monument sign being in front of the stop sign, essentially blocking view.
With the realignment of the proposed driveway, we will definitely set the monument sign back behind the site triangle, so it'll be behind the stop sign.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Ted?
Is there any thought to putting solar panels on the roof?
Not at this point. We do design the roofs. It's a TPO, thermoplastic roofing membrane that is capable of having them later, but as of right now, there's no plan to put solar on the roof.
There's such an expanse, you could have a lot of panels up there and meet a lot of the electrical requirement.
We see it done at some times, and other times we don't. I think it's a financial decision.
It's usually a negotiation between the developer and the tenant. If the tenant wants the solar panels, they have the ability to put them in. It's not.
Okay, as long as it's sort of
It's
hooked
capable.
up so it is possible to put them in.
That is correct.
Okay, if there's no other questions for the architect, we'll hear from your traffic.
Mr. Olivo?
Raise your right hand. Solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Name and address, please.
Certainly. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Charles Olivo, O-L-I-V as in Victor O. Stonefield Engineering and Design, located at 92 Park Avenue, Rutherford, New Jersey.
Mr. Olivo, you're a licensed engineer in the state of New Jersey?
I am, yes.
And how long have you been so licensed?
I have been licensed about 12 years now.
And you have a specialty?
I do. Yes, I have a Bachelor of Science in the field of Civil Engineering from the University of Notre Dame. I'm a licensed professional engineer. I'm also a certified professional traffic operations engineer, certified by the Institute of Transportation Engineers.
I would offer the testimony of Mr. Olivo.
Sounds good.
Okay. And Mr. Olivo, you prepared a traffic impact study for this project dated January 14th, 2019, and same was submitted as part of our application. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, and you are familiar with the proposed site plan? You're also familiar with the surrounding roads, are you not?
I am, yes.
All right, and can you just briefly give the board an outline of the impact of this development on Veronica Avenue, number of trips, and how you envision this facility will operate from a traffic perspective?
Yes, you've heard extensive testimony from the site engineer as well as the project architect as it relates to the development program of the site. The access to and from the property via vehicular access is through Veronica Avenue. We're about 3,500 feet from the spacing of the Route 27 Veronica Avenue intersection, which is generally to the south and the east of this development project that we have. So as part of preparing a traffic impact study, what we do is first review the roadway system, the street network that is directly proximate to the site development. We have conducted counts on a typical weekday during the typical peak periods at the intersection of Route 27 and Veronica Avenue, even though we are quite well spaced from that intersection.
Sir, can you just hold the mic up just to make sure we get it on the record?
Sure, of course. The counts were conducted from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. to really capture the peak times of traffic moving through that intersection. And I know we're all familiar with the challenges of the intersection during the peak hours. And in some ways, generally speaking, this particular use, this warehousing or industrial use, works quite well with those peak hours because the peaks of this type of generator actually complement your commuter rush periods well, and that they do not necessarily overlay directly onto those peak conditions. So we looked at the existing conditions, the traffic moving through the roadway network, particularly Veronica Avenue fronting on the site, directly adjacent to where the proposed driveway for in and out movements would be. We then fast forward to a no-build condition, which is a future condition without the project built. So we're just under about 930,000 square feet of warehousing space or industrial space. And so we've considered in a future condition, 2020, that there would be traffic, ambient growth within the street network. So that creates the future condition without the project being built in the way conceived. We then look at a build condition, which considers the traffic associated with this project moving in and out of the driveway and through the roadway system. The gravitational pull of traffic to and from this site, and we actually do use gravity models when we study where traffic comes to and from a project like this, is generally speaking to Route 91, Route 18, Route 1, and your I-95 corridor. I-95, the turnpike, carries just under 200,000 vehicle trips on a daily basis in this particular area. Route 18, about 70,000. Route 1, right around the same ballpark. So that is where the heaviest traffic is moving through the roadway network, particularly your heavy vehicle traffic and also your commuter traffic as well. And so from a distribution perspective, where we expect the traffic to come from and then on its departure, leave and head towards, everything is effectively moving to the east and the south, to that area of your highest traffic concentration. So in terms of the trip generation of the site in the proposed condition, what we would expect during the peak of the street network, 27 Veronica Avenue, 91, is essentially around 130 vehicular trips during the peak hour. Now, just to give you some relative scale, during the peak hours, there are about 2,500 vehicles that are traveling through the intersection of Route 27 and Veronica Avenue. We account for somewhere around 4% of that traffic. To break that down even further, the traffic associated with this project at the approaches of Veronica Avenue and Howe Lane would equate to about 1 to 2 vehicles during a cycle. The signal cycle is about 100 seconds. That means it turns 36 times during an hour. And that means that about 1 to 2 more vehicles during the highest times of traffic generation in this roadway network would be traveling through the intersection as a result of the development program that you have here. Now, this is a permitted use in the zone. The density is permitted. The traffic is essentially permitted as a result of your underlying zone plan. So what we focus on with permitted uses when we study the traffic associated with a project such as this is we look at the potential impacts to adjacent intersections. There effectively are none, very minimal changes to the amount of traffic traveling through the roadway network, as I've previously testified to. And then we also look at the safety of the driveway configuration, which we've worked closely with the project team, the Mazer engineering team, to understand and complete a design of the driveway at Veronica Avenue that would allow for safe and effective traffic movements to and from the property, both with typical passenger vehicles for office employees and also for your larger wheelbase vehicles. The truck turning template that has been run is for a WB67, which is the AASHTO classification for a tractor trailer that's about 73.5 feet long. That is typically your largest wheelbase vehicle that you would expect here. We've looked at typical vehicles, conventional passenger cars, as well as the longest wheelbase vehicles, and all can be accommodated with the driveway design. In addition to that, the project engineer has spoken about the circulation aisle dimensions, the parking stall dimensions, all either in accord with industry standards or exceeding those. You have a very conventional, intuitive design completely around the building, with parking being provided off of the circulation aisle, which works well for safe and effective movements into the parking stalls, the circulation aisles, and then in and out of the site. And you've heard testimony about the parking. We exceed the parking that is required within the zone. We would expect to have more than adequate parking to accommodate our anticipated demand. We have land bank stalls that are proposed as well to even further accommodate that demand. From both a traffic perspective and a parking perspective, we would not expect the site to have an impact on the adjacent roadway network.
Thank you, Mr. Olivo. I have no further questions.
I have a question. How do you define impact in this case?
What we look at are a number of different types of performance indicators. We look at things such as level of service. We look at the impact that I mentioned, which speaks to the amount of traffic per cycle. Is the roadway network, the volume on the roadway network, significantly changing or being altered by a development? That is essentially how we look at whether or not intersections, roadways are being impacted by site development.
So if the level of service is currently an F, it means it can't get any worse, right?
But the level of service F means is that you essentially have a congested intersection. Right. Now, level of service is one performance indicator. And so it is not the end-all, be-all of impact. It's one tool that we use to understand how roadways operate.
Yes, but a level of service F is as bad as it gets, right?
It is the highest level of delay qualitatively. Yes,
right. And
scales
so,
A through F.
Right, and so looking at NJ 27 and Veronica, you have westbound through Wright, an increasing amount of traffic, so the F is getting even worse.
Yes, the F degrades.
But there is no mitigation proposed as part of that.
No, we don't need to necessarily propose mitigation to change that level of service, because at the levels that we're at, and also when you have permitted uses within zones, that traffic is contemplated. There are things you can do, not necessarily required of this project, but through either municipalities or other governing bodies working with the jurisdictional agencies that govern roadways, there can be signal timing changes and things of that nature to improve levels of service.
But none were mentioned in your report, right?
No.
Why is that?
Because this project doesn't significantly alter the levels of service that you see at that intersection.
And when you're counting 1 to 2 vehicles per cycle, what percentage of those are trucks?
Approximately 30% of the traffic that we've generated, the scale runs from 27 to 33% based on the traffic study that we've conducted, would be truck traffic during the peaks.
Right, and so looking at that 30%, the width of the truck, the largest trucks that will be serving this facility, that's probably what, 4 cars?
Could be somewhere around, average car is about 20 feet long, Ford
Right.
Expedition 17'3", so if you had a WB50, you're looking at about 2.5, 3 cars.
Yeah, you're looking at the impact of a car and a truck as having the same impact when passing through that cycle. But the width of the car and the truck are different, and plus it's already congested. So the truck is taking up more space, correct?
Does take more space.
Right.
Also, within the analysis, we calibrate the amount of time it takes a vehicle to accelerate to move through an intersection differently. So that heavy vehicle traffic or the truck traffic at 30% is included within the delay values that you see. We're accommodating that spacing and also the time it takes for a vehicle to travel through the intersection.
I just simply note that I have a very difficult time now getting from Rutgers to my home south of 27 at that intersection. It is a very dangerous intersection, and so adding additional traffic, especially truck traffic, is of a concern to me, even though you see by your definition no significant impact.
Understood, and we see it at intersections that are congested during peaks throughout the New Jersey roadway network, so I certainly understand the concern. This project doesn't move that needle to a point where you start to look at intersection modifications, but I understand the concern.
Well, we talked about what government could do in terms of altering times, et cetera. What the client could do is provide incentives for employees to take public transit. And you can invest in public transit so that you don't have to have as much traffic coming to your site by way of automobile traffic, correct?
And now you're hitting on some great opportunities for traffic demand management. And so the solutions of the past were widen roadways, widen intersections, make changes to capacity. The problem with that is it would very quickly induce traffic and
Right.
fill to that point of level of service F again. And what project operators tend to do now in areas that are congested with traffic are exactly what you mentioned. They effectively have to as a result of the traffic. If there was levels of service A throughout the street network, those types of incentives wouldn't be worthwhile. And so as a result of what we have here, those are very real things that bear themselves out in projects such as this as part of operators coming on board, taking a look at locations and understanding the dynamics of traffic.
Thank you.
Quick question now, and I'm addressing this to Mike and Mr. Larkin. Traffic testimony is based on basically averages, right? And we don't have a use for this. What if there's a use that's in here that triples what these numbers are? Does the township have a protection, some protection and some recourse? Because there's no user here yet, so we're not throwing imaginary numbers. They don't have the same meaning.
Okay, the answer is that the township does not have any protection, but the state of the law is such that where you have a permitted use, a planning board does not have the authority to deny or condition an application based upon perceived traffic impacts. And that's the Dunkin' Donuts versus North Brunswick case.
Okay, the other thing that I was curious about is your traffic study includes all 375 or 400 cars that might be coming in, plus the movement of all the truck traffic.
Yes.
What bothers me about these applications now in this area, which is partly our fault as a township, this location is not at the end of a ramp off a major highway. Any truck that gets to this facility has to go through numerous communities and on numerous local streets. Right? You mentioned Route 91 or something. You know, that's basically a joke to call that a highway. But do you have an obligation to study the impact on 3 or 4 other lights on Route 27? What about the intersection of Hamilton and Veronica? You know, we can't sit here and say that they're not going to be impacted with 400 cars and all these trucks. You know, this warehouse has a big impact, in my opinion, because there's no easy way to get to it or to get from it. It's all local. What's your take? What do we do? Because it's going to have impact.
Well, you've heard from your board's counsel with regard to uses permitted within a zone created in your underlying land use ordinance or zone plan. You have zones created within the planning of your community, within your township. And so the applicant's obligation under the law is to study the safety and effectiveness of your ability to travel in and out of the site and within the site. Now, we've taken it a step further, and we've looked at the impacts. I suppose we could debate whether or not a road is a state highway or not, but what the testimony has been is that the large draw of traffic to and from this area is to the south and to the east, which is where you have the strongest interchange and confluence of both
I know,
interstate.
but stop right there. I know what you're talking about, but how do you get to the turnpike from this place? You go right through New Brunswick.
If I could just finish the answer, I'll be brief. You travel through Veronica, Howe Lane, then you come to the roadways that take you to the Route 118 interchange and then to I-95. So your question was, what is our obligation in terms of studying the impact? We've met that obligation.
Well, your answer is basically you have no obligation. You mentioned these roadways and the route you mentioned, Howe Lane. Okay, where do you go from there? They're all local streets. They're all going to be tied up with, I guess it's our fault. We shouldn't have warehousing in this particular section of the town, but it's easy for you to stand there and you give a nice, accurate report, and you walk out of here, and the people who get this approval now can go in and get any use they want, whether it conforms with any of the figures that you're throwing out at us. They could come in with an Amazon-type facility. Nothing's stopping them. We can't, and we're told we can't do anything about it.
That's actually true. And I mean, the case that Jim refers to basically has said that if you don't want the traffic, then don't zone it that way. Or if you have zoned it that way, then I guess you've anticipated that the roadways are going to absorb that traffic. And unfortunately, that's just the law. The other thing is, we don't, it's not, Somerset County indicated no interest because there's no county roads involved, where they would oftentimes, and Peter, you've brought many applications here where the county has asked for improvements and for contributions for intersection improvements and things. We don't have that case here.
That's correct.
So
the state DOT.
what about the state DOT? I don't know whether they get a say on anything, and they don't have jurisdiction. Yeah.
I think the problem is not, I think it's a combination of things. I think largely it's the size of the property. I mean, it's a 100-acre piece of property. No matter what this was zoned, if you zoned it residential, you'd have hundreds of homes. With the traffic, it comes with hundreds of homes. If it's office buildings, you're going to have, there's no market for office, but let's say you did and they built office, you'd have all of that traffic at the peak hours. Retail, same thing. It's the fact that you have a 100-acre piece of property. No matter what is built there, it's going to have an impact.
Yeah, and the only way to prevent it completely is buy it as open space, right? That's about it. Yeah, I mean, it is not a 5-acre or 10-acre site like on Cottontail where, you do a little addition and it's no big deal. So we've had a lot of those, and you've had them too, Peter, so just different.
And quite frankly, historically, we've had discussions with the municipality about perhaps developing the site as residential, and again, those issues were discussed, and they have their own traffic problems.
Well, to say nothing of the school
Of
taxes.
the other
right?
issues also. So
Absolutely.
the reality is, I mean, the sooner or later, this site was going to be something other than a golf course, and that reality has hit us today, and we've done everything that we can to address the issues as best as we can, and those issues that are within our control. There's certain things that we have no control over.
No, and unfortunately, and you know, Bob pointed it out, other people have pointed out, traffic is one of those things, and, you know, you've met your obligation to study it. It's probably, you know, compared to a residential use, less of an impact for sure. In terms of at least cars, trucks, it depends on really kind of what the use is. And, you know, I don't know, like you alluded to earlier when we were talking about the walls and fences and such, I guess you would have to come back if you had a larger impact than what your site plan would absorb.
Well, interestingly enough, with all due respect to Mr. Thomas, I mean, the trucks, you know, he indicates they'll go through New Brunswick. The reality is they'll go Howe Lane, Jersey Avenue, Route 1, and to the Turnpike. So they're really not hitting any local residential streets, because Howe Lane is basically a developed road with either offices or industry, and Jersey Avenue is also going out to Route 1, nothing but offices and warehouses. So it's not going to have the local impact. There's no question there'll be some traffic impact, but it's not going to impact the city of New Brunswick as such.
It is what it is, but there's going to be a congestion impact, and if anybody thinks there isn't, then they're smoking something that's...
Nobody's denying that.
Yet.
Yeah.
We're working on that. Okay, so,
I have one last question for
yeah, let's finish up with the testimony.
You have ITE trip generation characteristics for non-residential use published in 1994 as the basis for your methodology, as part of your methodology to see what the truck traffic would be.
Yes.
Is that the last time that manual was published for that particular category, in
No.
1994?
No, that is a publication article that was specific to different types of land uses.
Right.
The most recent trip generation manual was published, trip gen was last year.
Yeah,
Parking
so trip
generation
gen,
this
yes.
year.
But the one you're using to come up with your percentages for trucks
Yes.
is from 1994, pre-Amazon.
That is the most recent for this type of use, yes.
Yes, which is pre-Amazon explosion.
Yes.
There is no source you could have used that was more recent than 1994.
Not for the heavy vehicle percentage of industrial uses, no.
Okay.
That data is effectively being collected and built as we're speaking.
And with your own expertise, you could not have projected forward at a percentage much higher than what is shown here today, just to give us an estimate of what it could have been.
I wouldn't. We've worked on 15 to 20 projects that involve industrial warehousing use within the last 5 years, and those numbers are extremely close to what we see with actual operators performing at.
Okay. On the projects you've worked on?
Yes.
You just understand, Mr. Brown, the nature of your concern, is it the ratio of the trucks to cars?
Well, he has here that he calculated 27% of the total trips during the weekday period and 33%. That's based on a 1994 source, July of 1994, pre-Amazon.
Okay.
So you would expect to see an increase since 1994. Truck traffic has increased, so.
Well, actually, and that's why I asked the question, because I think actually the Amazon, the thing that surprised me about the Amazon was I think actually the car traffic was actually more than the truck traffic. They had actually had a much higher employee load than you would normally expect with a warehouse. They had, I think, 1,000 parking spaces for a facility.
But you've seen an increase in warehouses overall, right?
Well, I'm speaking to the Amazon. And
Right, that's
the
what I'm saying. I
reason
don't
why
want you to get
Amazon,
stuck on Amazon. I'm talking about warehouses in general. They're
Yeah.
exploding, right? So there's
Yeah,
more truck
that's-
traffic.
yes.
Right. So that's the point.
Yeah.
There should be an increase shown. He's using an outdated source.
Okay, I'm just saying, you're using Amazon, and the Amazon, it was actually a lower, they had a lot more passenger vehicles, and that's what created the need for they did do some localized traffic improvements, signalization and et cetera. That's because that use actually had much higher passenger vehicles as opposed to trucks. So I guess my point is, and it gets to some of the other questions here about, we don't know if this is going to be an Amazon-type facility or some other type of, and what do we do in that case? I think the applicant is probably, I'm sure, he used an average of, an ITE, and more than I do, they they sample hundreds, if not thousands, of warehouse facilities, and they generate numbers based on the average. If we don't know what the user is, I think we have to use the average. And obviously, there could be a tenant that has less of an impact than they're discussing right now. There may be it may be a tenant or two that has more. For the planning of this facility, I think you have to use that average and design it as
I
best you
certainly
can.
want us to move forward. I agree with you. I just don't think you have to use an average from 1994. But we can
No,
continue.
again, we've used the most recent data as it relates to parking and trip generation, and we're speaking about the vehicle percentage, which is informed by a publication article that is used throughout the industry. And so when new data is presented, and the Institute of Transportation Engineers is doing a much better job of providing that data in real time, then that data will be realized by the industry as a whole and utilized. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, this is not for us to debate. I mean, truthfully, they could be using manual from 1894, and the data would be just as useful to what we could do about it. Yeah, unfortunately. Okay, so any other questions for the traffic engineer? No. So I have one last question before we open to the public. Just to clarify, what is the contractual relationship between the seller of the property and this now the buyer and the Clearys regarding the 16-foot wall? In other words, if the Clearys were to sell the rest of the property and it would go to somebody else, would the wall remain? Would the wall be taken down?
I can't answer that question. I don't know the answer to that question.
I think I might know somebody who does. I'm just curious as to what would happen if the site, yeah.
Where's the microphone?
Hello?
Raise your right hand.
I affirm.
Solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do. Ephraim Gersberg, 2020 Acquisitions, one of the developers for the property.
Now, let's slow down and spell your name, please.
Efrem. Last name is Gersberg, Gerszberg. Live at 450 Harrison Avenue, Highland Park, New Jersey, 08904. I just want to clarify something. The contract, which really has no bearing on this, and I'll explain why I don't mean it, is not really what's driving the sound wall. I apologize. It's not at all, actually. It's compliance with the noise ordinance. If I could do this wall, the sound wall, at 6 feet, we would save, I don't know, $500,000. If I could do it at 8 feet, I'd save $400,000 at 10 feet. The town asked us to do a sound study. We did the sound study. This is the least it could be to comply with New Jersey law. This has nothing to do with the Clearys. I apologize for that misconfusion.
Okay, yeah, I didn't understand that.
Yeah, no, well, you should, it was misstated, so I apologize for that. But literally, this is, and the reason someone asked a very good question, there's a lot of good questions, but someone asked a very good question about why not over there? The Clearys is wide open space, so sound travels much easier. I think you mentioned that the railroad track, we did sound studies for this, so you have trees, and then you have a railroad, and then so the sound just doesn't go like that. And so we had a sound engineer do a full study on this to comply with the law. And that's the whole basis for this. And unfortunately, it's 800 feet at 16 feet. I wish it was 15. I promise I wish it was 14. You know, and we can keep on going, but I think you get the point.
So that's your expert's conclusion as to what size height wall is necessary in order to meet the 65 decibel maximum level.
That's perfectly said and correct, yes.
Okay.
All right, and then the chairman asked the question, what if the houses no longer exist? Is there an obligation?
I mean, I believe that whatever the statute is what the statute is. We don't want to we don't want to do more. I don't think we'll pull it down, but I think that statute anyway, noise ordinance, believe it or not, that applies to everyone. It may not be.
Yeah, no, it does. Yeah,
and a lot of people don't comply. We comply with everything because it just makes sense to.
Okay, that clarifies a lot. I wish that had been stated up front. It would have been good. No, thank you. All right, thanks. Why don't we go and open to the public, and then we'll come back and see if we have any other questions.
Move to open to the public.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, anybody from the public wishing to comment on this application and this application only can come forward?
Seeing no one coming forward, I would move that the public hearing on this application be closed.
Second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. So any other questions from the board to any of the witnesses? Any other things you'd like to say?
Just very briefly, before we got here this evening, we did spend a lot of time reviewing this project with township staff. As you can see with some of the exhibits, we did make major improvements to the landscaping and buffering. We did conduct noise studies, and I think when this project is built, we will be able to address our legal requirements regarding the adjoining property owners. I think the discussion was a very fruitful discussion, and I think while the increase in the size of the fence and the length of the fence will preserve or give the property owners a greater visual barrier. I think the noise has been addressed or will be addressed. And again, if it isn't, we will take care of it because we have a legal obligation to take care of it. I would like to also, again, remind the board this is a variance-free application. And while we've had some interesting discussions about zoning and other things, I think the real relevant issue is we have designed a project consistent with the Franklin Township zoning ordinance. We have met all of the requirements, and I would respectfully request a site plan approval with the additional conditions that we've agreed upon this evening.
Thank you, Peter. Any other board comments?
Mr. Chairman, if I'll just summarize, as far as if the board is inclined, some potential
Well, we're going to make a
conditions.
motion regardless, so yeah, go ahead, and that would be
Well,
good.
I'll
to
just
whoever-
summarize my main
Yeah.
form of motion.
Yeah.
I think the two main ones, obviously, they agreed to comply with all of the staff reports. I think the two main issues, one is the secondary emergency access, requiring the board to require that they provide one, and that it be designed in such a way that's satisfactory to township staff, specifically fire prevention. And then as far as the buffer, I think where we left off was that it would be they would supplement the existing vegetation that remains along that presumably northerly property line. They'll supplement that with a double staggered row of evergreen trees, at least 6 feet in height. Basically, it's going to go from one basin to the other basin, if you look from blue to blue. And then also a 10-foot-high fence, solid fence, and that'd be provided at the high points, depending on how the grade dips. I think those are the three main ones, and I think there's several others on the record.
And I think we agreed to sit down with you to see if we can provide additional landscaping around the basins.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that was the other one I was going to note. Yep.
I'll make a motion to approve this application with those changes and also the 24-foot that you wanted on one side. You forgot to mention that.
The relief of the ordinance requirement for 26 to 24.
Yeah, so we had talked but never came to a conclusion about whether we're going to limit the time for the use of the compactor.
Yes, and the time limit on the compactor from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. I know it's hard to enforce, but I think the residences in the neighborhood deserve that in case there is a complaint.
Also discussed, I don't know if you want to.
Just get closer to the mic, Bob.
You discussed, I don't know if it should go in the motion or not, the possibility of looking into landscaping the detention basin.
Yeah, they did mention that they would do that.
Yes,
Yep.
and the possibility of that. Okay, that's the motion.
A second.
All right, poll the board, please.
Robert Mettler,
Yes.
Maher Rafiq,
Yes?
Mustafa Manzareh,
Yes.
Carl Hauk,
Yes.
Charles Brown.
I would like to say, I was going to say no, but I'm going to say yes because it came forward with the noise, that they had done a noise study. My concern was that we were setting a precedent, and this was going to be distasteful in that decision. I apologize for saying that now that you guys have actually done the study. I would also say that, you all came well prepared to defend it, so I'm in favor of it. Thank you.
Robert Thomas?
I'm voting yes. I think you did a good job with what you had to work with in this area, and still think the questions had to be asked, and we got some significant concessions on things, so it'd be good for both.
Theodore Chase?
Yes.
Neil MacGyver?
Yes.
Chairman Orsini?
Yeah, I'd like to thank the applicant for a very thorough presentation, and for working with us. Peter, you've done enough applications. I'm not trying to be a pain in the ass, but you know what? It's my job, because what happens when things don't go right is, the applicant's long gone, the project's long built, and we're left to deal with the aftermath. So I have to protect the township and
And after
get the
they
best
yell at you, you yell at me.
Exactly.
They yell at me first.
You are once removed, so yeah, it makes a difference. So, but no, I appreciate it, and thank you for a very good presentation. So, with that, I vote yes.
Thank you very much.
Any other business tonight?
Nope.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
Next meeting is 2 weeks.
Third two. As of right now, we're scheduled. We'll let you know.
All right.
I don't
You'll-
recall
you'll
offhand if we have something.
Check your emails. So we had a motion to adjourn. I'll
I just
second.
made it.
Okay, we still need a second. All in favor? Aye.